Daily Detroit is brought to you in part by Castalia Cocktails. Don't just drink cocktails, experience them. With matching scents and knowledgeable barkeeps, it's a great experience. Try one of their pairings or feel free to go off menu with an adventure for your senses. The menu both tells you how boozy a drink is, and there is a full non-alcoholic lineup taking care to give you a top-notch sensory experience no matter how you'd like to drink. Whether it's the intimate indoor bar with less than 20 seats or on the patio outside enjoying the best Detroit has to offer, Castalia is a great spot for a night out, a drink after dinner, or a date. They're open to all Wednesdays through Saturdays from 5 to 11 p.m. with the possibility for unique experiences for small groups anytime with a reservation. You can learn more at CastaliaCocktails.com. That is CastaliaCocktails.com. Make sure to support the businesses that support us and stop on by. Hello, friends. Happy National Dive Bar Day, and welcome to your Daily Detroit for Friday, July 7th, 2023. I'm Jared Stays, and joining me is Mr. Friday himself, Devin O'Reilly. How are you, sir?
Jared, it's great to be here, and I feel it's only appropriate that I join you on National Dive Bar Day, as I know that's a passion that we both share.
I mean, it's a passion I think that may have brought us together in some ways.
You are not wrong.
And we are going to talk a bit more about that later. We've got a very busy Friday show for you with a little bit of news and a little bit of answering listener questions. We're here to be of service, right?
That's what we do, Jared. Keep it light on Friday, talk about the fun stuff. The dive bar stuff will be fun. We're going to throw out some great dive bar recommendations, some great coffee shop recommendations. So if you're into the whole what to know and where to go, you should stick around.
You could say that there are a lot of threads to pull.
You could say there are a lot of threads to pull. There's at least one more than there was a few days ago because we now have the launch of Threads, what's being dubbed the Twitter killer, so to speak. Mark Zuckerberg's foray into, I don't know what you'd call it, long-form kind of text-based social media.
Yeah, kind of like that. Basically, Twitter competitor. I mean, you know, Zuckerberg did post a meme that was like the Spider-Men like looking at each other and pointing at each other. He knows exactly what he's doing. We are on Threads, by the way. I gave it a shot.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm on Threads personally. You can find Devin O'Reilly on Threads. You can find Daily Detroit on Threads. Why not? Let's give it a shot. I know there's a lot of shade has been thrown at Twitter, maybe rightfully so. We're not wading into those waters. But I love competition. I love people being able to decide. Twitter has, honest to God, Jerry, I'll give a little bit of editorial here. My user experience on Twitter has definitely declined in the last, God knows, let's say since it changed hands and ownership-wise. So the user experience is as worse as ever on Twitter. And so why not? I think people are looking for maybe something different, something a little more fresh, a little less kind of in the mud, so to speak. I'm going to give Threads a shot. As a millennial, and as you are too, you like to say you're a geriatric millennial, whatever, but you're a millennial. We're of the same generation. And all those kind of like stories and charts and whatnot show that like our generation are the largest Instagram users. And so that bodes well for our generation also being kind of probably the best adopters for Threads because it's our wheelhouse. I'm optimistic.
Let's get into some local stories. This one just came out and it made me think, sure, it seems small on the front end that the Albert Kahn building, which we've mentioned a couple of times on the show. I've toured the apartments and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, the retail floor, the first floor and basement levels are going to be turned into 250 self-storage units, according to Cranes Detroit. Now, if people don't remember, this is a place that actually used to be a Saks Fifth Avenue. It was store number 4 from like the 40s to the 80s. It's an interesting space behind the Fisher Building. We've talked about this a number of times, how it's kind of like a quiet zone back there as far as street life. And it just got me thinking, and this is the reason it got me thinking. Of course, this is the logical answer of what's going to happen with a bunch of empty office and retail space. It's the easiest to convert. You don't have to put a ton of money into it. And I'm sitting here going, are we about to have like the self-storage explosion in empty buildings in downtown Detroit?
I hate to call it a self-storage explosion because I hope that's not what it is.
No, let's not go for that. Bad verbiage.
But at the same time, I think you're onto something, Jared, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, but obviously there's a huge paradigm shift happening in the kind of usage of space. And if we agree, at least you and I do, that office space is going to become less needed, and we also say that we need more residential, which we both agree, we need more hotel space, sure, that still leaves another piece of the pie. And I think that, yeah, some of that space could be storage. People, as they downsize, as they become more transient, we talk about the more remote work culture that's taking place, I could see more need for self-storage. And from a landlord perspective, building owner perspective, something is better than nothing. It's better to have, revenue coming in, and you can get a lot for these storage units in some cases, depending on how large they are. I mean, from a landlord perspective, it makes sense. You're bringing in some revenue, not what you would get for being an apartment, but at the same time, think of how much more it would cost to convert it. I think a storage unit conversion, very easy, relatively inexpensive, brings you some revenue. I totally get it. I mean, God, I can't be happy about it, Jared, because I wouldn't be happy about more storage units, but I get it.
Well, I mean, they're happening all over the region. There's office buildings in the suburbs that are doing it. Self-storage places are popping up everywhere between, kids moving out later in life, so you need more storage room, or people in smaller places, you need more storage room. It makes so much logical sense. It just kind of hurts my heart a little bit. And I wonder how many buildings could be converted. The only thing I can really think about is if the weight that the floor can actually handle is enough for it, depending on the building. I don't know all the technicals of every building, but I'm sitting there going, are we going to have like the Rensen self-storage tower? I have no info on that. I'm just speculating and pull that out of the air,
Let's hope it doesn't become like the Class A office use is self-storage, but I could definitely see like Class B, Class C outside of Central Business District become used as storage space. And again, it's kind of like blah, Jared. It's like, I appreciate that it's being used for something, but man, pretty much any other use would be better than this. I don't know how to feel about this, Jer.
This next one is interesting to me because we talk about transit a lot, and I saw come across the Twitter transom that Councilwoman Callaway is pushing DDOT, the Detroit Department of Transportation, to really start to look at light rail. And as she said, that if she were to reimagine a future for Detroit, it would include light rail. Now, that's an interesting thing to bring up. I know it gets a lot of people excited because a lot of people are far more excited about rail than they are buses, and the stigma that is in this town of buses and across the country. If you do something within a jurisdiction, you might be able to pull it off better, but then you're not connecting people to the suburbs where they need to get jobs. I mean, I have so many thoughts on this one. Your first thoughts, Devin?
Well, I applaud Councilwoman Callaway. I completely agree about light rail, but it's more about what are you going to do about it? One council person in Detroit being a huge supporter of light rail is not going to get much done. What we need is major shifts in support. And we're getting there. I mean, gosh, I think we're at a tipping point, really, Jerry, because we have county executives who are in favor of light rail. We have mayors of local municipalities who are in favor of light rail. We have legislators in Lansing and in Washington who are in favor of light rail. But what is that piece that's missing? It's probably the financial allocation and the agreement on where that money is going to come from. Because the issue that we've seen is that inevitably, when you start to develop a light rail plan along the obvious corridors, I mean, we don't want to get too much in the weeds, or we could, Jared, but obviously you can look at a map of our region and look at the spokes of the wheel, so to speak, and say, where should light rail go? But who's going to pay for it? And that's where it becomes an issue, because we have counties, we have cities that are very for and very against rail. And it literally depends on what city you're in, and it can vary from city to city. So that to me becomes the issue, Jared, is how are we going to pay for this? I think the support is there. My guess is that more than 50%, I think this is kind of proven out, more than 50% of the region is for light rail. We can safely say people want it, but how are we going to pay for it, and how are we going to set it up? That, the devil is in the details, really.
Well, and they might like the idea overall, but the details they might not like. So one of the things I noticed in looking at other cities in this is that Metro Detroit kind of does have a jurisdiction problem in that Detroit is not in the center of Wayne County, right? Like you're in another county when you're at the city border. And that makes things really difficult, at least to the north, and not that far out to the east as well. And to me, the viable path forward on something like this is if you do it in the city alone. And you say this is going to be a tool that we use to densify and encourage investment within the city itself. Because once you start crossing any borders, you start getting into messes. A lot of the cities I see that have been doing transit, their main city is kind of in the center of a county, and they do it on a county-wide basis. Well, here, it's kind of weird because Wayne County, like you go west and you go past Telegraph, things start to fade out pretty quick, right? Like it starts to turn really less urban very quickly the farther that you go west, even past Dearborn to an extent. And so I feel like if you did something in the city and said, okay, we're going to do this to densify this area, the question is how you pay for it. I also wonder how much the infrastructure is ready for it, because I looked through the letter and the responses from that DDOT, and he talks more about what they're saying is going to be BRT in the future. And that first round of BRT isn't going to have platforms. It is going to have level boarding. Like, it's just kind of gussied up buses at this point. And so I feel like there's a continuum here, and you do something like BRT, and then over time, if you can really find the corridors, then you do something like light rail. And it's got to be real BRT.
Yeah, I think you're onto something, but again, it comes back to like, one, if the city's going to go at it alone, which it might have to, first of all, how do you get that money? It's got to be ARPA dollars to me. It's got to be that federal grants, those federal
And they
dollars.
haven't spent them. Nobody,
I know.
A lot of people haven't spent them. It's not just a Detroit thing.
Right. So the positive, so good news, listeners, there is millions and in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars that is on the table for us to spend, and it could absolutely go to light rail in Detroit. How they harness that, I'd be running things if I knew how to do that. But there's an opportunity. And then from there, I agree building out into a regional transit map is the right call. But again, you almost have to say county to county. Wayne would probably be for it. There'd be a couple cities in Wayne that might not be for it. I'm not trying to, disparage anybody. A city like Livonia may not be for it.
Look, if you don't have sidewalks, you're not going to be for transit.
Right. So you go, county to county. Southern Oakland County, I think, would be absolutely for it. Northern Oakland County would probably not be for it. And then Macomb, total crapshoot. Gosh, this is the crux of our regional issues is transit. So it's very much a microcosm of how we function as a region or dysfunction as a region. But I agree, Jared, the only way to really do this might be the way that you mentioned, which is to start with the city of Detroit creating some light rail and then saying, hey, Dearborn, Ferndale, Grosse Pointe, you want to kind of build off of this? Let's do it as a county. Let's do it as a region. Let's do it as a state and then build from there.
Yeah. The other question is with this ARPA dollars, this is a one-time expense to an extent. Yes, there will be maintenance, but it's really difficult to fund long-term programs that have ongoing costs. ARPA is generally for infrastructure. So maybe there's an argument for that. And then for residents, is this what we want to do with it? So dailydetroit@gmail.com. Speaking of infrastructure on a much lighter level, there is going to be an expansion of those Ike Smart City kiosks. They are from a company in Columbus. They have proliferated around downtown Detroit. I would love to get a Daily Detroit ad on there. I emailed them. That would be amazing to do, is some sort of kiosk ad. Anyway, they're looking at expanding a bunch more kiosks up into Midtown. They even want to stick one at Evergreen and Joy Road out west. Some in Corktown. Another one on this map that was put together was right near the Grosse Pointe border, like at Jefferson and Chalmers. So really expanding these wayfinding kiosks around the city. Have you played with those? What are your thoughts?
I have downtown. And obviously for me, Jared, I'm not trying to be whatever, but they don't really have any use for me. I know where
about town, Mr. Friday.
Right. I mean, you're talking to the guy who could find his way downtown blindfolded. So I appreciate that they're there. I do see people using them for concerts, events, nights like that, days like that. But I am intrigued by having them broader, having them out more into the city, where if you are on the Avenue of Fashion, or you're in Grandmont Rosedale, or you're in Jefferson Chalmers, that would be kind of interesting to be able to have a kiosk there where you could find points of interest, food, beverage, whether it be gathering spots, things like that. I think these as a use case for out downtown Detroit are really intriguing.
I agree. It will be interesting to see how this comes together. All right. A question from a listener. We'll go here. We'll end the show at Dive Bar Day, I think. A question from a listener, though. James says, do you guys, specifically Mr. Friday and Jer, so I saved this for you, from Norris, from Fletcher, from Robin, from Cheyenne. This is for you, sir. Do you guys have coffee shop recommendations? A lot of the lists I see are outdated, and so much has changed the last couple of years. So I think we need to help James out, because I do agree a lot of the lists and things, they're outdated. There hasn't been as much effort to do new ones. There's a few that are. I know that I've been so busy with the show that I really haven't done many in written lists or whatever. But let's try to help our friend James out.
Yeah, I think we should, Jer. The best way to do this is kind of quick hitting style. I don't need to elaborate on a lot of stuff, but depending on where you're at, if you're in Midtown, Great Lakes Coffee has now become Red Hook, and Red Hook is doing just fine. They don't have the booze, but they still have fantastic coffee. You can find them on Woodward and Alexandrine. I will endorse, Red Hook. It's a great place to hang out, plenty of space to kind of spread out. do what you need to do. I have always been a fan of Desert Oasis in Capitol Park. It's also in Ferndale. Of course, Capitol Park is my home base there. So I've done plenty of meetings there, continue to do plenty of meetings there. So Desert Oasis, another favorite of mine. We talked about the Guardian building. You've got a couple of places there. You've got the Capital One Pete's Cafe there, which is a great place to spread out, take meetings, got 2 floors. And then you got the James Oliver and the Guardian, which is unparalleled as far as ambiance, views, things like that. You can kind of relax, look above you, look around you to the amazing architecture of the Guardian building. So those are my kind of quick hit favorite coffee places. What about you, Jer?
I'm going to go super rapid fire because I got a ton to add. So there's actually 2 more Red Hook locations to think about. One over by the Dennis Archer Greenway, and that is reopened after a car ran into it. Everything's fine. It looks great. And then also there's another one in the West Village. It has a great mural of a pheasant painted on the ceiling over there near where the old Harlequin Cafe was, near like Van Dyke and Agnes. So there's like 3 Red Hooks for you to enjoy. I want to throw out of course, a recommendation to the Congregation over there on Rosa Parks Boulevard.
Great call.
Oh, yeah. Quality spot. Great to meet people. Great to get work done. Great to have some fun into the evening because different places have different hours. So I wanted to throw that out there. Black Coffee is getting to be a strong entrant in the North End. They've got some cool outdoor furniture and stuff, and it's always good to support, that business right there. I will say Milwaukee Cafe in the coffee window. Can't forget that. There's The Gathering just a couple of blocks away from that. I mean, we actually have a ton of spaces. If you want to go get some pastries, you could go a block or so, less than a block from Red Hook in Midtown that you like to Warda Patisserie. And you could like double up if you want to. You could be completely caffeinated. Speaker Box, which you and I have met at, has got like great MCM vibes. It's also got the booze. So if you want to transition into evening, you can do it. They also do a lot of DJs and stuff in the evening, which is very cool. Very, very orange. The spot is very orange.
Yes. Very much. I love the places that are kind of a little bit of everything, depending on what you're in the mood for. Speaker Box certainly does that. I'll throw out there my last final thing, Jer, Coffee Down Under. Over there off Shelby. Really cool spot. Our buddy Tarun, listener of the show, friend of the program, has an amazing space down there. And if you want to hang out a little bit and you're there in the afternoon, the Speakeasy Shelby opens up at 4 o'clock. You can pop in there, which is just adjacent to Coffee Down Under.
Now, if you're running to the east side, I just want to throw out some neighborhood recommendations. I love Yellow Light over there on Jefferson and Jefferson Chalmers. And the reason I love it is, of course, I like donuts. Have you met me? But they've got an ever-expanding coffee options. And if you're a dog person, they do dog treats. And you can't say no to that. Like, I have to give a shout out, extra points for dog treats. When my dog sees that building, she starts losing her mind because she knows exactly what's going to happen.
So suffice to say, Jared, there are just countless fantastic options.
And there's more than we talked about.
Yes. And you know what? Speaking of that, since it is that day, there is more that we talked about. Check out all the coffee options, but also dive bars, Jared.
I knew you were itching to talk about that.
Dive bars.
Well, some of them actually made it through the pandemic. Mickey Lyons, who is kind of the barchaeologist of town, made the good point that a lot of these older bars own their buildings. So it kind of insulated them. All they had to pay was the taxes on the thing. I think about the Two-Way Inn, right? Like that's a generational bar. And, that place is still kicking. I think it's one of the oldest in the city, if not the oldest. You got places like Nancy Whiskey, I think still counts as a dive bar. You got places that are kind of newer, like Bumbo's and Hamtramck. They've got that patio they've got going on out there. I'm just throwing stuff out there. Go ahead and do yours.
Yeah, dive bar doesn't have to be old. I mean, I do think that we have to delineate now between the self-created dive bars. So again, I'm not disparaging anyone, Jared, but since we're dive bar day, I want to focus on the real dive bar. So like Second Best wants to be a dive bar, and they do a really good job, but they're not a dive bar. They're really not.
I think they're dive bar inspired.
They're a night bar. It's like, what's a dive bar? LJ's in Corktown.
Yeah.
LJ's is a dive bar. PJ's Lager House is a dive bar. Corktown Tavern is a dive bar. Now I'm just kind of like cycling through Corktown. But I love the Michigan Avenue Corridor. So quick thing about me, Jared, for listeners who may have not been around long enough. I grew up along that Michigan Avenue Corridor between Dearborn and Detroit. So a lot of my favorite dive bars are going to be along that area. So we're talking about places like Cass Bar, CAS Cass Bar.
Are they still around?
They are still around. They're absolutely still
around.
Even
after all the issues?
After all the issues.
Oh my
gosh.
They were
closed for a while.
And there's drama. Go look it up on Google.
Cass Bar is like, that's a dive bar. And then I want to throw out some deep tracks here, if you'll allow. And I would love, if there are any listeners, please shout this out. Have you been to the Alaskan Bar? Have you been? Exactly. Have you been to, gosh, it's not even there anymore, Brent's Place. Used to be a dive bar over there on the Michigan Avenue corridor. Freer Bar was a fantastic little dive bar on Michigan Avenue. So I'm going to stick with my Michigan Avenue corridor and say they always supplied all the dive bars I needed. Continue to do that. Donovan's my last one, as we're just throwing out recommendations, but also over in kind of the southwest Corktown area. So many great dive bars, Jared. And I feel like to be a dive bar, you can't try too hard.
No, you can't. And I want to hear from listeners too. I know that they're out there. I visited a few of them, dive bars that are out in the suburbs as well, because there's some epic ones out that way. But may I ask if I could pour one out near the metaphorical Pingree statue of Mr. Hazen Pingree for a dive bar that has been gone for a few years, but I feel needs one poured out for it?
Go for it, Jared. What do you got?
Tom's Tavern.
It's been a while. Jared,
Yeah.
I see a few years. I think we're talking more than a few.
I think it's 2017, 2018, something like that. Like I dug through my pictures and like that's
Maybe that far, Jared, but I think it could be further back. But yes, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while, but that was the most epic of dive bars. Slanted floor, old jukebox, plywood walls, and a bowed-in roof. You couldn't get better. And here's the thing. Every once in a while, somebody would just drive in and like drive into the wall and steal a bunch of booze and leave. And then they just re-plywood the side, and then they'd keep on going. This was a bar that you had everybody from Mike Ilitch to Bill Bonds drinking at. It was like the bar for so many things. And Tom was the original thing. And then it went through a couple of owners, but unfortunately it passed on with the most recent owner, which is a sad thing. And I just want to like give a shout out to that one. It is a shack. It is not fancy. It is.
And you can't visit it now, Jared, so don't go too far. You're going to make people jealous.
You know what? It was a beautiful time. I got to tell you, it was a beautiful time to be alive.
What a time to be alive.
To be in that bar. If you've got those memories, dailydetroit@gmail.com. All right. Devin O'Reilly, so good to talk to you.
Great to be here, Jared. Especially, again, National Dive Bar Day. Again, it's a special place in our hearts, truly. I think I'm just going to have to go to a dive bar after this. You got my mouth watering for the dank smells of a Detroit dive bar, and so that's really the only way to finish my day here.
A shot and a Stroh's?
Shot and a Stroh's, and then back to the baby.
Just a quick pit stop to refuel you, if you will.
And give me the liquid energy to kind of finish my day as a father.
I want to mention to people that we are entered in the podcast awards in the news and politics category, podcastawards.com. Your nominations would be really great to help push this show forward. You know, we're against some really huge national shows and some shows have great following. So I want to show that Detroit and Michigan, we can be part of it. And your help would be greatly appreciated in nominating us at podcastawards.com. So with that, I'm Jared Stays.
I'm Devin O'Reilly.
Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.